Hello and welcome back to Era 7 of the APUS History Curriculum. In the last two videos, we looked at the topics related to World War II, both at home and abroad. In this video, we will be looking at topic 7.14, Post-War Diplomacy, which is a look at how the U.S. emerged as the most powerful nation on Earth at that time. Although we are going to even go more in depth with this topic as we get into the next time period. But let's get to it. In contrast to the other participants of World War II, the U.S. ended the war as the world's greatest creditor. We had loaned allied nations a total of about $50 billion, mostly in lend-lease supplies. We also held the most of the world's gold and had virtually no physical damage to our own land. This allowed the U.S. to become the most powerful nation in the world because most European cities had sustained tremendous damage. Germany especially, but even Britain. And they didn't have the cash available to rebuild. The U.S.-funded Marshall Plan extended almost $12 billion in grants of goods and services, plus just over $1 billion in loans, to European governments, where the goods could then be sold to their people, generating funds for rebuilding. Those goods were produced in our factories and farms, which were more than capable of producing supplies for the American public, as well as providing the exports needed. By coming up with a system to rebuild, countries that accepted the money were much less likely to experience a communist uprising or fall under Soviet influence, which then became the unofficial goal of the Marshall Plan program. That helped lead to increasing tensions between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, and the desire of the Soviets to increase their control over territory that sat between themselves and Germany, effectively dividing Europe into a communist East and a democratic West. In addition to increasing the availability of capital to European nations, reducing trade barriers by reducing tariffs was also a major foreign policy goal, with tariffs dropping from almost 60% to about 13% by 1950. Keep in mind, those rates are only for imports that were subject to a tariff. A majority of goods were able to be imported duty-free. Another key aspect of diplomacy after the war was the occupation and administration of the defeated nations. Germany was divided into 4 zones of occupation, with the U.S., France, Britain, and the Soviet Union administering it, while Japan was occupied by the Americans, since the Soviets had no interest in having troops under the command of an American general. In both cases, the military establishment of each nation was demolished so that there could be some level of collective security regarding the prevention of a future war. In addition, the U.S. oversaw the establishment of a democratic-based government in each, with the exception of the Soviet zone of occupation in Germany. Also promoting the idea of future peace was the establishment of the United Nations. The goals of the UN were similar to that of the failed League of Nations that it replaced, but this time it actually had the infrastructure to carry out those goals. At the same time, the UN organization would be heavily influenced by the US, as the number of nations that were more closely aligned with it outnumbered those who were more closely aligned with the Soviets. Plus, the headquarters of the UN was located in New York. A final post-war diplomatic issue was how to deal with the presence of nuclear weapons. At first, the U.S. was the only nation to possess them, but by 1949, the Soviet Union had tested their first atomic bomb. By 1952, the U.S. had produced a new, even more powerful weapon, the H-bomb, to add to its growing arsenal. But the Soviets had that too, just about a year and a half later. The presence of 2 nations with an increasingly tense relationship and with both possessing nuclear weapons technology is a major factor in the development of the Cold War that we're going to look at more closely in the next time period. Well, that about covers what you need to know about topic 7.14, post-war diplomacy. Be sure to keep up with your reading, and I'll catch you in the next video.